When I go to some places famous for its beauty, as the Cathedral of Notre Dame or Grand Teton National Park, I expect to see amazing sights, but I'm always delighted when I unexpectedly find something amazing. Two places that took me by surprise were ones that most people never heard of. I had never heard of them until shortly before I went there, and I'm glad I did. While driving the lonely and desolate highway from Las Vegas to Great Basin National Park, I needed a pit stop. I saw a sign for the Pahranagat Wildlife Refuge, and it appeared to have a visitor center, which I assumed, correctly, would have a bathroom. The first unexpected moment of delight was the wildlife refuge itself. When I got out of the car, I was met with a cacophony of bird sounds. It sounded like Disneyland had piped in artificial bird noises to try to create an atmosphere for one of their rides. The two women volunteers who operated the wildlife refuge were quite friendly and helpful and seemed to be happy to have someone to talk to. I'm not sure they get a lot of visitors out there in the middle of nowhere. There isn't much water in that part of Nevada, so the wildlife refuge attracts coyotes, deer, and over 200 species of birds, some that are found nowhere else in Nevada. The ladies at the refuge asked me if I was planning to stop at Cathedral Gorge State Park. I told them I had never heard of it. They strongly urged me to stop and check it out, and I was so glad they did. I was not prepared for the otherworldly beauty of Cathedral Gorge, but was smitten from the moment I got there, and I became more fascinated as I hiked some of its slot canyons. In my research, I could not find any evidence that Antoni Gaudi ever made it to Nevada before he started building the magnificent La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, but it almost seemed the spires and rock formations of Cathedral Gorge inspired his famous architectural work. I had only planned to stop for a few minutes to check it out, but it drew me in, and I ended up spending hours exploring more and more of the park. I kept seeing more amazing sights. Usually this close to Las Vegas, when you see a sign for slots, it means something entirely different. There were other areas of the park that included interesting rock formations and an old water tower. Not only was I fortunate to have stumbled across this place thanks to the good tip from those women, but the clouds and sky were perfect, which made for some great photos. There was an entire other section of the park that I had to drive to. It included a walk down a stairway to hike in a canyon. Although it was very hot, I still wanted to explore before I finally had to leave and drive to the motel that I had booked near Great Basin National Park. I had planned to spend this day in that park, but actually found Cathedral Gorge more interesting than Great Basin. No offense to that national park, so I was glad I had used one of my Great Basin days in Cathedral Gorge. I will cover my visit to Great Basin on another episode of Walts Wanderings. Another unexpected delight was in Arizona, Chiricahua National Monument. As though my friend and I needed another excuse to stop, but it was on the short list to possibly become a national park. Someone, and I wish I could remember who, had suggested that if I was going to be in the area, I should stop at Chiricahua. I am very glad I did. I had been to several national monuments before they became national parks, notably New River Gorge, Cuyahoga, Indiana Dunes, Joshua Tree, and Death Valley. Part of what made Chiricahua so amazing was the weather. We were greeted by rainbows as we drove in, and saw more rainbows from the top of Masai Point. We also saw lots of lightning from up there, enough to make it a little scary. And we saw lots of grapple on the mountain and felt some coming down. Grapple's an odd cross between rain and sleet and snow. There were pockets of it scattered around the mountaintop from earlier precipitation. We saw a sign for the aptly named Hailstone Trail. Chiricahua was established as a national monument in 1924, and for the last few years has been under consideration to become the 64th national park. That change in designation would mean more funding for the park for infrastructure, a better visitor center, more staff, things like that. These things are not likely to happen soon, but may someday. We made a quick stop at the visitor center to decide which hiking trails or sites we would have time for. We wished we had had more time to explore, but we were running out of daylight and the looming storm was making things a little dicey. There were frequent lightning strikes and more as we got up the mountain. We counted the seconds between the flash and the boom, and the strikes all seemed far enough away to not make it too risky, But after almost getting struck by lightning in Grand Teton National Park, I was a bit concerned. Chiricahua reminded me at times of Pinnacles National Park in California. There were so many unreal-looking rock formations. Plaques explained how these natural sculptures came to be. Some of these odd shapes made us wonder how those rocks could even stay up there, but the answer was they couldn't, as evidence from all the rocks we saw that had fallen down. From what we learned at the visitor center, it seemed like a hike at Masai Point would be our best option given the little time we had available. We drove up the winding road past lots of interesting rocks, and it was tempting to want to stop and photograph each one. From the plaques at Masai Point, we learned how these unusual mountains and rocks were formed. There was a platform just off the parking lot which provided a grand view of the area. The dramatic sky made it even more interesting. The shifting clouds and light illuminated different mountains and rocks and trees as they shifted around. Maybe it was the threatening weather, or the time of day, or the time of year. It was September, so after peak season, but there was only one other car in the parking lot, and we only saw 2 other people in the entire park. Here's a shot of them on a rock in the distance. And here's my friend taking a photo from the observation platform. We wanted to get hiking, but the light kept changing, making the view from the top of the mountain more interesting by the minute. Then we did hit the trail, and along the way found more strange rocks that made the place seem otherworldly. We hiked along the edge of a ridge and at times under overhanging rocks. The entire time the skies threatened to open up and start dumping rain, and we were not as prepared for rain as perhaps we should have been. If the rain started and we were far down this trail, we were going to get soaked. Some of the rocks reminded me of the hoodoos that are common in the national parks of southern Utah. At so many of the rock formations, we were tempted to want to crawl through and explore the interesting passageways they form. The friend with whom I was traveling loves to scramble over rocks and was wanting to climb everything in sight, but we knew we'd run out of daylight soon and the rain was coming, with possibly closer lightning, which was still crackling in the distance. But the views and rocks kept us captivated. We could see the rain in the distance moving towards us. It started falling heavy, and parts of the trail became rivers and waterfalls, making walking treacherous, and had us concerned that parts of the trail might be washed out by flash floods. Areas of the trail were now unpassable, and we had to detour around them. As we got back near the parking lot, the sun came out again, and we again got some great rainbows and some interesting lights shining on the mountains. We were soaked, but still enjoying the scenery. There was still so much to see, but we were sorry we were running out of daylight. On the drive back down, we saw several fresh rock slides and wondered if we got trapped on the far side of one of those slides, how soon would help be coming. There was no self-service on the mountain, and as we got to the bottom to use the bathroom at the visitor center, the center was just closing, so there would have been no one around to come looking for us. There were 4 animals we really wanted to see in Chiricahua: the ringtail cat, the coati, the Barbary sheep, and the javelina. The friend with whom I was traveling had seen javelina in Big Bend National Park. This is his photo from there, but I've never seen one, and I didn't on this trip, unfortunately. Barbary sheep were introduced to the region of North Africa and are considered an invasive species, competing with the local wildlife for scarce resources, so there is a hunting season for them. I guess the animals all had enough sense to stay in out of the rain, unlike us, so we didn't see any of them. Many national parks sort of have a list of animals you're supposed to try to see. On the list in Denali, for instance, are moose, caribou, Dall sheep, grizzly bear, and wolves. I had seen them all except wolves in Denali. Anywhere I have been, wolves have been the most elusive. In Yellowstone, the big 5 to see are moose, grizzly bears, wolf, but with elk and bighorn sheep instead of their cousins, the caribou and Dall sheep. There are Dall sheep in Denali, but I was never able to get very close. They tend to hang out on high rocks far away from people and predators. Other than lack of wildlife, Chiricahua was an amazing stop and definitely will be worth a return visit. What is the most unexpectedly delightful place you've ever stumbled across? Tell me about it in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the adventures. Next on Walt's Wanderings, we'll return to Europe to visit the charming and historic town of Newcastle upon Tyne in northeastern England. Come along, won't you?